Our Bible word is Numbers 6 verses 24 to 27. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. So they shall put my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them. So this is known as the Aaronic blessing. This was a blessing normally spoken by priests to people who came to sacrifice and worship in the temple. And it's also often spoken by the high priest on the Day of Atonement after he's come out of the Holy of Holies. He would raise his hands like this as a gesture of blessing, and he will say this special blessing, the Lord bless you and keep you. So this is a very special act performed by the priests and also the high priests on the Day of Atonement. So let's first look at Numbers. Where does the book of Numbers fit in? Firstly, the name. The name comes from the census lists that appears in the first 4 chapters. And the Greek, it uses the name arithmoi, and that means numbers. And it lists, it's a census, it lists all the fighting men of Israel. So that's where the name comes from. It's those numbers, that census that is listed in chapters 1 to 4. And how does it fit into the grand scheme of things? Of course, it forms part of the Pentateuch, and it means 5 scrolls. Otherwise, it's also known as the 5 books of Moses. It refers to the 5 books of the Old Testament. So if we look at the Pentateuch, it's of course Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And of course, Genesis, that is about the creation of the world and its inhabitants, and also the stories of Israel's patriarchs, their ancestors. The Exodus, of course, that's a story of the plagues and the Exodus out of Egypt and their arrival at Mount Sinai. Leviticus, that depicts the situation of where Israel was camped at Mount Sinai, and that is where the priestly laws were given, and also the holiness code, etc. And then the book of Numbers that we are concerned today, that is where they are still at Mount Sinai, and they then leave for the promised land, and it recounts their desert wandering, and they arrive in Moab. That's the area east of the Jordan River. And Deuteronomy, that's situated to the east of the Jordan River in Moab, and that is where Moses gives the last instructions to the Israelites. So that's how it fits in. So Numbers, it's supposedly begins 13 months after the Exodus. So Israel spent basically a year at Mount Sinai. They're receiving the law and they're erecting the tabernacle. And now Numbers is about, like I said, that census in the first 4 chapters. They must be shaped into like a fighting force. They must be assembled, they must go on the march, and they must go to the promised land, and there they must fight the people that's there. But and that's kind of covers the chapters 1 to 25. It's the first generation of people that left Israel. They are counted. There are about 600,000 fighting men. Of course, it's a greatly inflated number. It can't be historically accurate. But they are assembled, the census is there's roughly 600,000 men, and now they must march off to the promised land, and they're there to fight war. But as things turned out, they're very disobedient, they are rebellious, and of course God punishes them, and they don't make to the promised land. So chapters 1 to 4, it speaks of the census, these fighting men, and they are go to fight, and up to chapter 25, it ends in disaster because they're disobedient to God. And the next chapters, from chapters 26 to 36, that's now the second generation that's addressed in the book of Numbers. So the first generation has passed away. There's a second census in chapter 26, again of about 600,000 men. And they are now encamped on the east of the Jordan River, and they are also addressed, now you, when your forebearers, they made mistakes, they're not here, Now, it's up to you now to get this right. So there's a second census in chapters 26 and getting the men ready again to go and fight. So chapters 1 to 25 covers the first generation who didn't make it. Then chapters 26 to 36, it covers the second generation and also what happens to them as they are about to enter and conquer the promised land. And of course, because the first generation was so rebellious, they didn't listen to God, it covers a period of 38 years and 10 months where the Israelites wandered through the wilderness. If they were obedient, their march would have been straight to the promised land. But because of their disobedience, now it took them 38 years, 10 months, and the first generation didn't even make it. Now it's the second generation that's being addressed. So that's the bigger story of Numbers. And of course, it also contains various laws that are given to the people. Also, the story of Balaam, that false prophet, and other things, but also how to worship, things about offerings and sacrifices. There's also the immediate chapter 6, it's how to make a Nazirite vow. It wasn't required, but it was done out of your own free will. It was a special dedication to God. That it was also that only temporary. And also part of worship to God was the priests and the high priests, how they must give this what's known as the Aaronic blessing. So there's a little bit of this, a little bit of that in Numbers. But the biggest story is their journey from Mount Sinai to Moab, east of the Jordan River. That took them over 38 years now because the first generation was so disobedient. So in chapter 6, part of the way to worship God, here are the instructions specifically given to priests, Aaron and the sons of Aaron. Those are the high priests, etc., and priests to follow after them. And this is the blessing, what it says. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Essentially, these acts of blessing serve as protection, divine protection. God will keep them, but also signs of God's divine favor. So the first blessing is about divine protection. The Lord bless you and keep you. The second one, the Lord makes his face shine upon you. That also recalls Moses' encounter with God. God was in the presence of Moses. So it's a way of saying God will make his presence known to you. He will be in your presence. His face will shine on you. This is also specifically a sign of divine favor. And now the third blessing, the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. That is, in other words, the Lord will kind of lift his head also and look at you. Now, in terms of metaphor, if you look at the Old Testament, when God's face is fallen down like this, it's a sign of anger. And you'll find that in Genesis 4 verses 6, etc. And of course, if his face is hidden, in other words, he's withholding his support, his favor, he's not engaging with you. And that kind of imagery we'll find in Deuteronomy and Psalms as well. But if God lifts his face towards his people, then in other words, God's actively engaged with him. He's giving him his favor, his blessing, etc. It's a sign also of peace here. And of course, the Hebrew word shalom, peace, it means much more than just inner contentment. It means overall well-being. It means salvation. It means good health, safety, general well-being, and the like. And that is what God wishes for his people. Yeah? This shalom, this peace. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you. In other words, he's involved with you, he's engaged with you, his blessing is upon you, and give you peace. In other words, give you the shalom, this overall state of well-being. So that's the blessing that God will give his people. And that's also the way his name will be put on his people. Because if his name is on their people, they are his possession. And others will also know they belong to the God of Israel because he blesses and protects them.